The UPMC sports medicine experts in Central PA are here to help keep you in the game and improve your quality of life, no matter your age or activity level. Visit upmc.com/Central PA SportsMed to learn more.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Pennsylvania High School Football Report. I'm Brian Linder, here with Dan Sostek. Dan, what's going on, my man?
Not much now. I always call it's always this is kind of the weird part of the football season, right? College football's winding down, NFL season's ramping up, and we've got our big games going. I'm just every time I open Twitter now, I see another, transfer announcement or a coach changing. A lot of it's a crazy time for football right now.
Yeah, a lot of former Pennsylvania high school stars in the transfer portal. I think Macklin Ayers is out there as a grad student who had a really good career at Upper Dauphin and then Dartmouth. And Marquise Williams, who was the All-State running back for Bishop McDevitt. They won a state title last year.
Patrick Garwo.
Yeah, he's over. He was at Minnesota. He's in the transfer portal. Patrick Garbo, who was outstanding at Conwell Egan,
Yep.
Boston College. He's in the transfer portal. A lot of guys are, man. And
Brandon George from Berks Catholic.
yeah, all your Pitt guys are getting out of town. But
Yeah.
look, we've talked about the transfer portal. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's a double-edged sword for me. Like, I feel like kids are tasked with having to make a really important decision when they're like 15 or 16 years old.
Yep.
And they're getting a lot of flashy things put in front of them. And so when they get somewhere, maybe something isn't quite what they seem, or there's a coaching change, or heck, I don't even necessarily have a problem if a kid goes somewhere, competes for a starting job and doesn't get it, and see somewhere else they might be able to start. Now, some people say, well, you're not really a competitor or whatever, but look, you only get 4 years guaranteed, right, to play college football. So if you can play somewhere else and it's not working out there, I don't necessarily have a problem with that either. But then I think it really affects the high school kids too with their opportunities, because obviously if you're at the college level and you can get a guy who can get it done, like a Marquise Williams, who's been in the Division I program in a weight room for a year, you might take him over a high school running back who you think is going to take 2 or 3 years to get on the field for you, because you might think Marquise might get on the field for you automatically, right away, or Macklin Ayers at linebacker. I don't know, how do you feel about this transfer portal stuff?
See, for me, one of the kind of I think that when you're a player in college and you're doing it because you can make more money elsewhere and help your family. I think that's I don't think that's the most fun thing for college fans, but I think it's a totally fine and justifiable thing to do. You got to look out for yourself. I think the places where I kind of run into a little more, or I kind of question it a little more, kind of at the lower levels, where it kind of feels like guys are just transferring just because, just as a substitute for development, and if they haven't played that much at the lower levels, just kind of transfer to another school rather than kind of work their way up, things like that. But again, it's always really tough to tell from the outside. You don't know. A lot of times it's the coaches saying, "Hey, we don't," kind of nudging them to transfer as well. It's a kind of double-edged thing. But like you said, I think that there are a lot of benefits to it for the kids, and I think that's what it's there for. And again, if you're getting paid $1 million to leave to go somewhere else, go ahead. I think that's what's happening at Duke with Riley Leonard's going to go to Notre Dame, and it sounds like, and probably get a cool 7 figures for that. So like that kind of stuff, it's probably not fun for the Duke fans out there, but you also can't really blame the kids. It just there's kind of, it just feels like it shouldn't be this default. I haven't played for 2 years, so I'm going to transfer thing. I think that makes coaching a little tough too.
Well, when adults complain about it, I always say this: that adults had from the beginning of time, from whenever we first rolled out the pigskins till now, get this figured out, and they drug their feet, and they dominated the power. The coaches and athletic directors for so long. Now here we are, some of the powers returned to the players, and now you get all these complaints. Well, look, guys, you had 50 years to figure it out, and you didn't. So, and now the kids, and people say, oh, the players are getting paid. Well, it's name, image, likeness.
Yeah.
It's their value. They're not getting paid by a school either. So,
Yeah.
and I know it seems like there's gray area with that, because you get all the collectives and stuff. But I always lean towards what's good for the kids. So there's that. If you guys get hop on social media or even look at Penn Live with some of the local guys, we put them up there. There's a lot of guys hopping into transfer. I think more than I've ever seen. So
Yeah.
be interested to see how it plays out. Also for these kids, like I said, these high school kids. This is where I do come back, and I kind of my heart hurts a little bit for them. Is that I think there's some kids out there right now. We've talked about kids who should have offers or don't have a lot of offers that we would have them 6 or 7, 8 years ago. And this, I think a lot of that has to do with these colleges waiting to see what 21-year-old or 20-year-old they can get out the portal
Yep.
before they go down to their high school ranks. So tough double-edged sword. But hey, let's talk about some high school football. And people don't know, Dan, last year was a huge year right here in Harrisburg. We're in the center of the state, guys, and we had the Harrisburg Cougars make the state finals in 6A, and then the Bishop McDevitt Crusaders won it in 4A, and Steel High won it in 1A. Uh, and they're all very close proximity, so it was a big deal for the city and stuff. And now here we are, semifinals again. This coming up Friday and Saturday. And all three are in it, Dan, with a chance to get back to the state championship. This is big stuff for. I mean, Harrisburg's right here, it's the capital, but it's really a small area. When you talk about just how far apart these schools are, it's big stuff for such a small sort of circle you could draw around these schools.
Yeah. And I mean, we kind of talked about this on Tuesday, but I think that the big one here, because McDevitt, awesome job building up this roster, but I think we all are aware that they kind of have a leg up in terms of how they can build that roster in a way a school like Harrisburg doesn't. Um, Harrisburg to me is just the standout because I remember going to that state championship game last year and just opening up the program and looking at the roster sizes and looking at how Harrisburg had a smaller roster than I think both of the 3A and 2A
He had
schools.
the third smallest roster
Yeah,
and at the state championships
and they're
playing. Okay.
they're basically competing against college level team up there in St. Joe's Prep. And for them to be as good as they are consistently with the challenges of that program in terms of roster size and having to play your quarterback at defensive back, which you do not see very often at 6A. You see that at the lower levels sometimes, but at 6A, I can't imagine any of the teams left besides Harrisburg have their quarterback playing corner and playing well. To me, I think it's honestly because they've been so good for so long. You just kind of accept it as, hey, Harrisburg's in the state semifinals again. But for them to do it, especially with how young their roster is, I think that's super special. And again, I'm not trying to dismiss McDevitt because there are plenty of other private schools that don't have near the success they do. There are plenty of other schools with Division One quarterbacks that don't have near the success they do. And they won last week not because of their highly touted recruits. They won because of their defense, which is actually more of a kind of underrated group of kids who are kind of some D1 talent, but a lot of really kind of good football players. But to me, it's just I think that we all know the history McDevitt has, and kind of Harrisburg to me is the one that's super impressive, and Steel High too. But Steel High's done it for they've got that core group and they're in a smaller classification. I think that we almost sort of can take for granted what Harrisburg gets done at that 6A level.
Yeah, well, like last week I said, I've seen this movie before. And I felt like they might could go and I picked them to beat Manheim Township. In my heart of hearts, I really thought Manheim Township would probably win the game, even though I picked Harrisburg. I only did it because I kind of had like I said, I felt like I'd seen the movie before, and so sure enough, Harrisburg goes out and beats those guys. I mean, I thought those guys, Manheim Township, were going to be state title contenders, and I
Yeah,
still think that they're one of the few teams in the state that might could punch back a little bit if they would have faced St. Joe's Prep. Harrisburg is unique. They're going to play a North Allegheny team that is really good. I don't think they make a lot of mistakes. They got Logan Kushner, who's really quick, more of a running quarterback, but he can sling it a little bit too. He's not, he's a little fella, but he can sling it a little bit too. And Cam Chamura down in the middle, and they got some guys. Um, so That's going to be really interesting. I don't know. I think out of all three of them, I think Harrisburg has the toughest road back.
Yep.
So, I don't know. How do you feel about these three games we got coming up?
Yeah, we to kind of go over what we talked about on Tuesday. Um, I think that I really I kind of agree with you that Harrisburg's kind of got the toughest matchup. But after them beating Mannheim, I think I picked them this week just because I'm tired of not thinking they're going to win because they proved me wrong. I've been kind of doubting that they'd be able to beat Mannheim all year long, and that win to me spoke volumes. It makes me think that they're playing their best football at the right time of the year. That said, the North Allegheny matchup, North Allegheny also has a kind of win against a team that I don't think a lot of people pegged they'd beat when so it's going to be really fun. I'm going to be up there. Um, I I think that it's going to be one of those games that there aren't going to be a lot of moments where either team feels in control. I think it's going to come down to a couple drives in the third or fourth quarter. Maybe one team gets up by 10 points, 14 points, but I just think that this Harrisburg team's too tough to put away.
The UPMC sports medicine experts in Central PA are here to help keep you in the game and improve your quality of life, no matter your age or activity level. Visit upmc.com/Central PA SportsMed to learn more.
Yeah, last thing I'll say on Harrisburg is we've had this discussion again. I like to talk about players more than I like to talk about coaches, but I go back to this and I sort of tweeted it. I really think that win for me, we've had a lot of good coaching jobs, and we've kind of mentioned this on this podcast in this area across the past 2 years. Probably as good a 2 year stretch of just head coaching jobs like Tim Bigelow taking Camp Hill as far as they went in the playoffs and things like that. Bob Bowden, West Perry's done a great job. Jeff Wechter, obviously, he might win 2 state titles in a row. Andrew Irby might win 2 state titles in a row, three out of the last 4 years. We have some great coaching jobs. But to me, the mark of a good coach is you never lose to a team you're supposed to lose to. Harrisburg pretty much never loses to a team they're supposed to lose to. Probably the last shocking
You
loss they
mean
had.
lose to a team they're supposed to beat?
Yeah. Well, lose to a team they're supposed to beat.
Yeah.
Probably the last shocking loss they had, was probably earlier this year when Mannheim whipped up on them in the regular season.
And that was just by the nature of how it happened.
Yeah. Or last year when Mannheim Township beat them 24-21 in the regular season. But at the same time, like you said, now we know that was a pretty good football team they lost to. And so they don't really lose to teams they're supposed to beat. And they get better throughout the season. They just get better. To me, that's the mark of a really good coach. And that puts Calvin Everett and the guys he puts around him, Jesse Haar, Troy Koch, all those guys, Big Cat. And I know you got Kevin Brown's dad out there coaching with them, and a whole cast of guys there. I think they do one of the better jobs, not just in the area, but in the state.
Yep. And again, it's with kind of going uphill a little bit in terms of their classification.
Yeah.
They get a ton out of these kids, and the scary thing, and I think we talked about a little, is there's even more. I think there's even more room with this team. I think we've all talked about. We think that there's another level they can get to with Elias Koch at wide receiver. We think that I don't think underutilized is the right word, but I think there's still more meat on the bone there with I don't think there's anyone really in the state that can consistently stop him in a jump ball situation. Like maybe there are one or two kids that that can win maybe 3 or 4 reps out against him, but he is a jump ball machine. And I think it's because their run game's so effective because Sean Lee can move with his legs that instead of risking a potential interception or something, he's just going to take off and run. And I get it, but I think there's a lot of meat left on the bone in that offense with Coke.
Yeah, he's I've said this. I saw AJ Green play probably 5 or 6 times in high school.
Mhm.
And he's not as fast as AJ, doesn't jump as high as AJ. AJ is one of the best high school football players you'll ever see. But he reminds me a little bit of him in jump ball situations, the way he's got the long arms and he kind of just plucks the ball. He's got the strong hands. And Harrisburg hasn't used that a ton. They used it there to tie the game late in regulation on a fade, and then went right back to it for the 2-point conversion, send that thing to overtime and beat Manheim Township. That's an X factor for them. There's not a lot of high school corners that can cover, that. So I'll tell you, Dan, another big topic of discussion. If Harrisburg wins, they're all but assured to have to face St. Joe's Prep, which beat Nazareth 59-21 last week. One of the better Nazareth teams that have been around. And St. Joe's Prep has been a lot. And we're back to, is it unfair what's going on with St. Joe's Prep? How they have guys that they're bringing in and stuff like that. Look, we have to cover those guys too. And the PIAA makes their rules. But that's been a big topic of discussion. Our sister outlet at Lehigh Valley Live wrote about that. I don't know, Dan. I don't want to get into the back and forth about it, but I'll say this. It, look, I have great respect for what St. Joe's Prep does. Their program. If my son was a great football player, I consider sending them there. If I lived here in Pennsylvania, but I don't know what Bob Lombardi and those guys are looking at, but it certainly looks unfair when they line up on the field in state championship games for the most part. Now there have been some times like when they had a young group and I think Penn Trafford. When did Penn Trafford beat them?
Was it 2-3 years ago?
Yeah, and they were very young. They were freshmen then. They had some kids there, and so a lot of these kids have been together now 3 or 4 years. I will say that, but they have some guys too that I know have transferred in. Again, I don't know. I appreciate what they're doing, what they've done. They're playing by the rules given to them from the PIAA, but it certainly doesn't look fair when you get on the field.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree with both your points that it's just always tough seeing a team that kind of has enough talent that, their list of commitments might be as big as some 1A schools, like starting as 1A schools rosters. But I also think it does kind of give you a crutch, right? To be like, hey, we're playing a team that like we can't beat, and I don't think that has not been Harrisburg's mentality all year. They've been saying that they want that matchup all year, but you look at you do also just kind of have to a degree, even with kind of the leg up that they have with the roster they're putting out, you do have to respect the level of success they've had to a certain extent, because there are plenty of other prep schools that put together these ultra talented rosters, and they're not winning state titles at the rate St. Joe's Prep is. Now, St. Joe's Prep depth is different than every other one of these schools, but it's still not a foregone conclusion. Like there's still ways that they couldn't be as good as they are, and they still are. So I think it's like a confluence of those things, right? It's a confluence of them having the resources to kind of build up the roster the way they do, and also having a staff and a program that takes advantage of that. Overall, I do kind of agree with you that when you go up and you see they've got another Trotter son and another kid going to Ohio State, it does feel kind of ridiculous. But I also think that you can't afford to think that way if you're playing again.
Well, Harrisburg won't, and North Allegheny won't. They're both tough teams.
Yeah.
Whoever gets there is going to give them their best shot. But on paper, if either of them win, it's like one of the biggest upsets ever, especially Harrisburg with their small roster. But, again, I don't know what the answer is, for people, because I get asked this a lot, and that's why I'm bringing it up, oh, this isn't fair, whatever. And it certainly doesn't look fair, on the field. But they're playing by the PIAA's rules. So I don't know what the answer is. Maybe open it up for everybody. Say anybody go where you want to go. Florida does that.
Yeah.
That's a little bit of crazy, but it might sound that way. But
I know Bob Bowden got some. There was some blowback because I think people, and kind of, I guess, fairly kind of took his comments after Westbury lost to Y missing. They kind of took his comments as directed at Y missing, and maybe they were. I don't know. You have to ask Bob that. But I think he was just sort of, when he was saying that he feels like no one cares about this issue and that he's the only one that cares and that he doesn't know what the PIA is looking at. I think you can just take those comments at sort of a macro level, right? That it feels like there are rules in place, and it feels like they are kind of haphazardly enforced, right? There are some kids that have to sit out all playoffs all year, and then other times, and it's no different than the NCAA, right? It feels like the NCAA has a similar issue where it almost feels like they just pick and choose who gets an extra year of eligibility or who has to sit out a year. And it just, the lack of consistency and the lack of, frankly, even at our level, I mean, as people who cover this stuff for a living, understanding of what's legal and what isn't and what's allowed and what isn't. Like, I'm being honest, I really don't understand what the rules are. I just wait till someone says this guy's eligible, this guy's ineligible, and then I write that down. But I think that it's
It's supposed to be black and white, but it feels very arbitrary
yeah,
sometimes.
yeah, it just feels like it depends. It feels like I just feels like, and because I guess there's different levels of governing too, depends where you get a hearing or things like that. It's such a mess, and there's no clean way to do that. I'm not sitting here saying I have any answers on how to do this stuff because these kids also have to look out for themselves, right? You said if you had a kid, might send them to St. Joe's Prep. You don't blame any kids for going there. You don't blame St. Joe's Prep for saying yes, we'll take them. It's just the way it is.
I don't knock anybody for trying to go for what they feel is like a better opportunity. The same with the transfer portal,
Yeah,
you know. But then when you get there on the field, like last year in Harrisburg, beat the odds to get there, and they got this small team, and they trot out there against what looked like a college team. I don't know, man.
yeah,
And but at the same time, I love to watch St. Joe's play because they're so good. So I don't know. I don't have the answers either. The PIAA gets paid a lot of big bucks to kind of come up with these answers. I just don't know if they're serving everybody the same way. So, but anyway, Dan,
yeah.
Popeye's turkey was kind of man.
It was, yeah, it wasn't my mom's turkey was one of her best, so it got rave reviews.
I don't think I'd spend the $60 on it again. It was not bad, wasn't great.
But it's an experience, right? You check it off the bucket
Right,
list. You
that's right,
say, "I had a Popeyes turkey and you didn't." So,
that's right. Everything else was slamming. So
yeah.
we had a good Thanksgiving here, and now we got a big Friday of football. And
Yeah.
Dan, and Saturday, Dan will be heading down to Altoona to watch North Allegheny, Logan Kushner and the guys try to take out Harrisburg. To never say die Harrisburg Cougars.
Yeah, and
Alex Irby will be going for a state record, single season record for touchdown passes. He's already got the all-time career record, and the all-time passing yardage record. So he's going for a single season record this week. So that will be a big thing to watch for too. Dan is Steel High makes its push to return to the state championship.
yeah,
So
I mean, there's a chance we have 3 returning teams to the state that we have the exact same 3 teams from last year in the state title game this year. They got business to take care of, but that'd be pretty impressive for those 3 programs and kind of all in the same general vicinity too. So would be pretty cool.
all right, guys. I think we got a podcast. Check me out at Sports by B Linder on Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Check Dan out. Dan, tell them how to find you on social.
Dan_Sostek, Sostek. You can follow along for some updates from Altoona, from Toontown.
Check out all our stuff on PennLive.com. And, not just football. We got a lot of basketball previews coming out for the Mid-Penn division picks and stuff like that too. So check that stuff
Yeah,
out.
a lot of these coaches are waiting for these state playoffs to end because I think Alex Irby, Elias Koch, Quincy Brannon, all these kids are basketball players too. So I'm sure they're rooting for to win the state title, but I imagine that a couple of these coaches kind of want this to end so they can get their starting power forwards back.
Yep. All right, guys. Till next time, check us out, PennLive.com.
The UPMC sports medicine experts in Central PA are here to help keep you in the game and improve your quality of life, no matter your age or activity level. Visit upmc.com/Central PA SportsMed to learn more.